You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 507, our coverage of The Witch and the Wookie, which is a short story from Myths and Fables by George Mann. I almost said from a certain point of view. That's in a few days. But more on that a little bit later. So this is now the third episode that Lauren and I have brought to you guys, kind of covering short stories that have happened over the course of the last 3-4 years. There's a lot of great collection of stories out there. We've just not really spent the time and figured, hey, summer's here. We got no TV to talk about. Why don't we get into some of these great stories and talk about them more? So I've already spoiled it. Yes, Lauren's here with us tonight. Lauren, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about this story. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, and you picked this one. I think it was one of the better ones, if not the best one from Myths and Fables. I think it has its own merits, but more on that here in just a second. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to all of our Patreon members, especially the now part of the tribe members, Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh C., Jacob, Steve, and Rita Reborn, and those in the Delusions of Grandeur tier are Rod, CJ, and Alex. If you guys are interested, you guys can head out to Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon. You can sign up there for as little as $1 and all the way up to $20, I think. It just really depends on what you want. We've pretty much got packages for just about everybody and the types of content that you want. So as a quick reminder, we will be back on this Sunday, and we're going to do another short story, this time from a certain point of view, which is going to be the Empire Strikes Back story. And you had narrowed it down to 3 stories. And I think you're letting me pick are you letting me pick the final one?
Yeah, I need some input. I'm so indecisive. I need some help.
How are you when someone takes you to a restaurant and says, "What would you like to eat?" or "What do you want for dinner?"
No, see, that's not even an issue because I order the same thing every single time everywhere I go. So that way I don't have that problem.
Right, yeah. Just stick to the same thing. You don't have to worry about it.
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're going to go with probably my favorite story, which is Disturbance by Mike Chen.
Okay, good. That was one of my 3. So that's
I know. I saw it on there. Well, I was going to pick one of the 3 that you had narrowed it down to, but when I saw that, I'm like, I'm not even going to consider the other ones because I really like that one. It's some really good stuff. So we'll be talking about Disturbance come this Sunday as far as the Patreon spotlight. Again, that's a short story from Mike Chen that talks about in that moment. Maybe we'll pick that up at the very end of the show. We'll talk a little bit about what's expected there. But if you're not a Patreon member, you can go sign up and you can catch that show again this Sunday at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. actually, because we'll be doing the Waystation. So all of the news for Star Wars on Sunday as well. We've also got a new Jeditorial out there. Let me see if I can pull up the link. There we go. Nope, that's Lauren. Let's talk about you, Lauren. What do you got? What do you got right now on the YouTubes?
So recently I posted my how to read Star Wars, how to get started if you've never read it before. So we've talked about that previously. So that video is out there for anyone who's thinking about reading Star Wars novels that wants to give it a try. Check out my video. And it just kind of gives you a place to, I don't know, if you're like, there's so many, I don't know what to choose from, kind of gives you a way to tackle that. And then in addition to that, coming up next week, I have my the High Republic Phase 2 comic is about to conclude or has concluded. So I need to finish my coverage of that. So I'm excited to wrap that up because that was a really great comic series. So that video is going to be coming up on Tuesday.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's good stuff. Looking forward to it. I really enjoyed, again, that reader, where to start with Star Wars. I think that makes a lot of sense. You did a really good job on that one.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something I've heard a lot of feedback on is people are like, okay, these books sound good, but like, what do I even do? So that's why I feel like it was needed.
Yep, for sure. And then if you head out to cantinacast.com/jeditorials, we've got a new Jeditorial out, and this is by Jeff Englehart. He's one of our longtime supporters, Patreon person. We've had a chance to meet him at Star Wars Celebration. I think this is what he kind of does for a living. He's a writer, so this is probably the best one that's been done, and I mean that in all sincerity. So if you get a chance, check it out. He's written a piece here kind of reflecting on the Kenobi series just about 1 year later here. So very insightful, very thoughtful piece. Check that out when you get a chance. The link's right here. Again, cantinacast.com/jeditorials. We've also got other Jeditorials in there as well. You can check those out if you'd like. But yeah, head out there and read that one. It's a quick read, and it really kind of paints a new light. It did for me for the Kenobi series, which I think was really insightful. So thanks, Jeff, for contributing to that. Finally. Okay, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. He's been busy. He's been real busy. Okay, let's get into our main topic, which is going to be the Witch and the Wookiee. So again, this is from Myths and Fables. This came out 2020. George Mann was the writer behind this. This was his first one, I believe, that he did. I want to say it was.
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah. And they did like 3 different versions of it. There was like the regular release, which had the Knight and the Dragon story, I think, or if that's the correct title, I forget now. That's got that cover on there. Then they did this one, which was the Target exclusive. Oh, this is the thing that I hate. Here we go. I'm not going to get in a soapbox, but they did this one that's got some exclusive stories to Target. And then they did a third version, which was sold only at Galaxy's Edge, and that had 3 additional stories, which I've not yet read, simply because I don't have that copy. That copy does sell for quite a bit now, so I may have to chase it down at some point and just pull the trigger and buy it. But all of the stories I think are really good, but this one kind of stands out a little bit than the rest of them. This one feels, for me, more fairy tale-ish. I mean, I know it says Myths and Fables, right? And we were kind of joking about this last week, but it does feel like it's kind of in its own little category. It almost feels like it slides slightly into the Dark Legends. Like there's almost like a spooky ghost, dark side story to it. But so Lauren, you picked this one. What was it about it that kind of spoke to your?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much exactly what you were saying. It's got that, especially it takes that fairy tale feel, which seems to stand out in this story, and it meshes it really well with that darker atmosphere, and then takes that tone and blends it with Star Wars in what feels like a very seamless way. Like, it doesn't feel like they were just pasting another type of genre on top of a Star Wars story. Like, it feels like this story fits this atmosphere and this tone very well. So I think that's part of why it feels so effective, is just the type of story being told just really fits with the tone in which George Mann was writing it.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think all the stories are pretty good. I think there's some that are certainly better than others, and I think you're going to find that across the board with most of these collection type stories. Some just are, and honestly, like even some that I feel like, the writer was like, it was okay. They've come back and wrote another story, and either from a certain point of view or Tales of Light and Dark, and it's a better version. It's a better story. So it just really depends on what kind of resonates with you most. So hopefully we can get more of these done. Besides the one that we've got this weekend coming up with Empire Strikes Back, because there are a lot of great stuff in here, a lot of fun topics to discuss. Now, quickly about this story. So this is actually based on two of the characters from this are based on the Star Wars Uprising game. I never played this game. I think it came out in 2015. And by 2016, they had already kind of pulled the plug on the game itself. But this was kind of supposed to be it's almost like it was like a Diablo, like kind of adventure RPG story that took place after the events of Return of the Jedi. There was this governor who was like putting a barricade around the Hoth system in that area. I forget what the name of the system is called, but and 2 of the characters from this are the Witch and the Wookiee, which honestly I had not really put those 2 and 2 together until we started doing the research and I read it. I was like, oh, okay, I thought these were actually characters that George Mann had created, but I thought it was great that he was able to pull that stuff into this, and it makes sense because it's on the same planet, which is, we're going to get to it in a little bit, but Josh is the planet with Josh Krill as the moon. But it just feels so far-fetched, so far out there in the middle of nowhere. And given the purpose of the story, it makes sense that someone would have selected that. I just wonder if it was a, serendipitous or unique coincidence that he just happened to have a witch and a Wookiee, right? And then, or did he, I wonder how that came to be. Was it he found those characters and wrote the story based on that, or he wrote the story and said, "Oh wow, I'll just turn this character into a Wookiee, this character into a witch, and voila, magic happens." But any thoughts around? What did you get? Did you ever play that game? I never did. Like I said.
No, I never played it, but I'm familiar with like the premise of it and kind of like the general sort of idea. But no, I haven't played that one. But they shut it down, didn't they?
Yeah, it was gone within like I want to say within a year. I think after when that actually happened.
Yeah.
The other thing that came out of that was one of the planets. So in the Mandalorian, when Mayfeld is talking about the planet that he was on, and his commander had killed all of his folks, and he had that big moment where he shoots him. That planet, and I forget what it's, Kuhn, I think it's Dune or something like that. I forget the last part of the name. I can look it up, or maybe somebody can help us in the chat here. But that planet was the very first time that I think we actually brought that up during that particular episode. So now this is the second time that they've gone back to this Star Wars Uprising game and pulled out, well, in this case it was two characters, but they had already referenced a planet from that game before in Star Wars Legend or Star Wars canon proper. So interesting that they keep going back to that, which I think is good. Right? It still ties it all together, it keeps it all canon, so everything's happy. But I want to quickly talk about. I want to get your thoughts, I guess, on Dathomir witches. I know where Jonesy stands, and of course I know where I stand. But we've talked about Dathomir witches quite a bit. We've talked about the magic they use and how they interpret the Force, how they manipulate it. Well, maybe that may not even be a fair word to say manipulate. But I guess, what's your relationship with the Dathomir witches, and are you guys on talking terms again?
Well, I mean, I do think it's cool how, when we think of Dathomir witches, the Night Sisters are only like one component of that. So it's cool how, like, in Legends, there's like all these different clans that have like different cultures and different ways. And the Night Sisters just happen to be the one that we know the most about in canon, and like have that dark side usage. So I think it's really cool how there's like a really rich like history and culture of Dathomir witches, and like I feel like there's so much that could be explored there. But I could see how some people might feel like it's almost too much of a blank slate, because it's like, what are the parameters here? But I just love the idea of it. I think it's a cool thing to explore, and I feel like this story is like a good example of exploring a way that a Force user who is not a Jedi is still able to use that as a means of accomplishing things. I mean, it's just kind of like another way of looking at what all the Force can do.
Yeah. And we'll get to that specifically at the very end. Like, when the magic happens, right? It's not, I don't want to spoil things. It's not uncommon. Like, it makes sense in the context of what we've already seen. There is an episode of the Clone Wars when Count Dooku comes and visits Mother Talzin, and he's trying to talk about, I think they're looking for another warrior, right? This is the Savage Opress storyline. And he sits down at the table, and Mother Talzin summons, like, she creates this, like a chalice or whatever to drink whatever she's giving him to drink. But she manifests this thing out of thin air. You know what I mean? Like, that's like pure witchcraft. But yet in the Force users, like, how would that even work? Like, and although they still, and we're not going to get into all details of this because this is beyond the scope of the story, right? But I guess what I'm saying is, at the very end, there is something that happens in this story that probably can't be explained by the Force per se, light side or dark side, but definitely falls within the realm and possibilities of what we've already seen, what's already been established in canon, with the use or manipulation of the shadow magic, right? That the women use there. So we'll get to that here in a little bit. Again, I'm trying not to spoil things. I want to save it so it's a big surprise for anybody that's not read the story. Okay, and the other thing I had in here is I want to get your thoughts quickly on the Wookiee, because this is one of the few Wookiees that I'm aware of in canon, and even in Legends, we don't have that many that are kind of like evil characters or dark characters in some way. Generally speaking, most of them start off pretty good, and then something goes wrong, they're enslaved or whatever. We have Black Chrysanthemum as one of the primary examples of someone who kind of went down the wrong path, if you will. But how did you feel about having a mean Wookiee? And you can kind of see his head just above me right there. He's not a nice person.
I mean, was he wrong, though? I mean, that's kind of my question. See, again, I'm trying to also not spoil how the story ends, because Because
Right.
I feel like the main Wookiee was kind of onto something. But I mean, and I mean, Wookiees are known for like if they are slighted or if people close to them are slighted, they can get aggressive. So to me, it actually wasn't a surprise because I mean, think about like, you know, Han threatening Chewie's going to rip your arms off, or then like
True.
in Book
True.
of Boba Fett, we see it actually happen. I mean, I know Black Chrysanthemum was like a particularly aggressive example, but I don't know. Like I could see it because if you think about it, the witch is like that's probably his best friend. So of course he's going to defend her.
Right. But I have a question about whether he's actually there. But again,
Dude,
more
I
on
feel
that.
like we're speaking in riddles right now. And
All right, let's just get into the story. Let's just get into the story because there's so many questions, and that's I guess that's one of the one of the things I really enjoyed about this story is that it's not black and white. I think there are some things that are kind of left to interpretation in some ways, you know, right? But yeah, more on that here in a second. So let's talk about the story. So why don't you kick us off and kind of give us the beginning of who are, I guess, the protagonists. I don't know what they would be considered in this story, but let's talk about the pirates because they're the kind of the main focus of this story.
yeah, so we have 3 pirates named Marath, Kalab, and Juliet. I might have totally mispronounced those names, but you get the idea.
Yep.
And they're on a stolen ship, which they have stolen from what was once a larger crew. The 3 of them decided to break from the crew, steal the ship, steal the treasure, and just try to make their own way. So now they're being pursued by the rest of that crew and also the Imperials, who the treasure was originally stolen from. And so they're hopping from star system to star system, trying to find a place to hide to where they're not going to be caught, and also a place to hide their treasure for like a longer period of time. And so all of that whole setup, that's how they ending up in the situation where they end up meeting the witch.
Yeah. So, and here's something too, like it was never clear to me whether this was set, you know, during the reign of the Empire, age of rebellion. Reign of the Empire, of course, would be immediately following Revenge of the Sith, right? Or do you feel like this may have taken place in the age of rebellion where, you know, because it starts off by saying, you know, it's talking about the emperors and power and that, you know, yes, he's got a lot of power, he's got a lot of reach, but at some point, you know, there's diminishing returns. He can't get all the way out to like the outer rim. The grip is loose there, and that's kind of why all this stuff kind of happens. And even further into wild space, it's just kind of a, you know, free, you know, outlaw kind of place. But it was never made clear in terms of whether this was immediately after that or closer to the rebellion. Any sense of where this lands?
I was kind of going back and forth on that a little bit because the way that they set it up in the beginning on that very first paragraph where they're explaining that kind of what you were saying, that during the emperor's reign, this type of stuff was common. The way that they worded that, it made me think that it would be during the emperor's reign. And then in addition to that, when I was just thinking about like context from other stories, since we know that during the empire, organized crime was able to flourish a lot more, that also made me think maybe it is still in the empire, because it sounds like once the New Republic came in, they were at least trying to clean some of that up.
Yeah, I think they had a even though it was probably outside the scope of what they were really trying to do, which is bring order. Well, I mean, if they were just trying to bring order to the galaxy, then it means, yes, we're going to have to take on pirates, and yes, we're going to have to take on the empire. But I'm sure those pirates were getting in the way, or outlaws were getting in the way of this stuff. So they were probably, you know, battling 2 fronts there, or multiple fronts, as it were. I think that makes sense. For me, I think I probably placed this during the reign of the empire, but I don't think it really matters one way or the other. I was just curious your thoughts on that. So, yeah. Okay, so these pirates have all this treasure. They're trying, like Lauren said, they're trying to find a place to go hide this thing, how to stow it away. And they come up, I guess it doesn't really say how they get there, but they land on going to the Hoth system in the Anorot sector, right? And there's a planet called Joss. The idea is, okay, we'll stow the treasure away. We'll leave it there for like years, like literally years, and let the trail go cold. Let the interest die down from the empire. Let the interest die down from the guild that we just screwed over. And then we'll come back wherever we store this treasure and go, you know, pick it back up. We'll split it up 3 ways, and we'll all be happy and merry and whatever, right? That's the plan. Sounds conceptually pretty sound. then they end up going to Jash Krill, which is one of the moons of that Jash planet. Josh is like a gas planet. So one of the moons. Interesting, though, it doesn't explain this in the story. I think this came through the Uprising game, but that Josh Krill, of all those planets, like this is the only one that, or all the moons, this is the only one that's inhabitable. And there's like some science around how the pressure system, was the Josh planet proper was causing certain atmospheric conditions within Josh Krill, specifically just that moon because of proximity and all that stuff, that allowed it to have kind of like this really humid environment, which allowed water and vegetation and all things. So essentially this planet is kind of like a swamp. I mean, it's basically nothing but swamp, nothing but jungle. Think of it almost as a death valley. Anybody that ever went there probably never made it back because there's just nothing there. So for all intents and purposes, this should be a completely isolated, uninhabited planet. And so it seems to be like the perfect fit for what they're looking for. I think George Mann called it wild and untamed, teeming with plant and animal life. So I kind of almost picture this as like Dagobah in some sense, right? Without the dark clouds and the atmospheric conditions or whatever it was that was going on there. But no planets, no buildings, completely uninhabited. And they get to the planet, they're kind of, going around the surface looking for a place. And ideally what they're looking for is kind of a cave, somewhere where they can stow this stuff away. And then the idea too is once they had it in a cave, stowed it away, they would have some kind of defense system up as well, just in case anybody did come across it. They had some kind of a robotic droid sensor or whatever that would go off and keep them out. So it sounds like they had really thought through all of this plan, I guess, as best as they could. So they end up landing there, and then they decide they're going to go head out on foot. And the idea is to go out on foot, look for this kind of a cave place, and then get back before it gets dark because, they're not familiar with the terrain and the animals and all that stuff. So they're constantly going through and walking through this jungle, the swamp. And as George Mann was talking about this, like, as he was writing it, I almost got the sense like he said that it almost felt like the jungle was shifting and like it was blocking off ways for them to get back. And in my mind, I thought, you know what? I wonder if that was the witch that was doing it, right? This Dathomirian witch. Do you think she would have the ability to kind of lure people? I was thinking, okay, think about it like this from Empire Strikes Back. When Luke is trying to make his way to Vader, there's things happening either through Vader, I don't know if it's ever really explained, that are causing Luke to just naturally go there to meet him, right? We have that perfect example where things light up and doors close and it's like, oh, I guess I'm going this way. That's kind of how I interpreted this. Like she was leading them by closing off places, having the jungle and the swamp stuff kind of block certain ways just to ensure that it was inevitable that they were going to come across her little hut. Am I reading way too much into that, or was it just a figure of speech?
That I want to go back and reread that part because I did not pick up on that. But now that you're saying this, I mean, he did spend an awful long time explaining how they were moving through the jungle. Mm-hmm. So I think that there could be a purpose for why he took so much time to go into that level of detail with it. But I mean, that's interesting because I was previously of the belief, and I think I probably still am, but I felt like that she really truly was just minding her own business and they just picked a fight with the wrong person. But if she had the power to actually adjust the landscape to lead them to her cabin, I mean, that's a pretty cool power to have.
Yeah, and I think it would be possible given, what the witches are capable of doing. I was trying to find so here's the passage. And if I could read this real quick, it says, the three of them searched for hours, trudging through the mud, but still no caverns or hollows presented themselves. Thus, they were forced to delve deeper and deeper into the forbidding jungle, their boots stirring the swirling swamp water while unseen creatures slithered around them through boles of trees following through the undergrowth. The jungle proved to be difficult to navigate, and the pirates had a sense that even as they walked through the passageways and through the trees, they were shifting and altering in their wake, branches twisting and knotting together to block their retreat.
Okay. The first time I read that, I interpreted that as this jungle is just very like wild, like it's like untamed wilderness that it's like hard to find like any sort of like anything to like fix your eye on as like a landmark or anything because it's just like so much plants. But if I sit here and think about like the stuff that she shows us that she's capable of later in the story, I could see that as within the realm of possibility as well.
Yeah. No, and I understand, like, reading that, it sounds like it's just the fact that they're lost and everything looks the same and it feels like we just came this way and this is blocked off and, you know, it's really not because they can't see further. Depth perception is thrown off, right? It's just a very dense kind of jungle. But then I thought, you know, if I was a witch and I really wanted them to be here, but your point's well taken a little bit later too. Like, it does feel like she is genuinely surprised, like, oh, we have visitors. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, they end up getting through most of this stuff, or getting through the jungle. They're still trudging through. Again, the night and it's been hours and hours at this point. Nighttime is starting to kind of set. It's getting dark. They've got a single torch at this point, and eventually that blows out. Like, that torch blows out, and they still press on because they're so far away from their ship at this point, and they don't have, you know, they have no course but to keep moving forward. So they end up going through the dark even without a torch for a number of hours. So why don't you pick us up there on them coming up on the house?
Yeah, so once they're getting desperate by this point. Lots of scary stuff out here. So when they come out on the house, it's almost like it's kind of like beckoning to them. It's the only safe space that they've come across. It's pretty much their only option in comparison to all this scary stuff out here. And they get there and she's like in the middle of like making dinner, it sounds like. So that's just making it even more enticing.
Right.
Because I'm sure they're hungry after all that walking for all that time. But yeah, and so when they get there, she does seem surprised to see them. But it's almost hard to get a read on her emotions. Like, I feel like I read this a couple times, and each time I read it, I felt a little bit differently about what exactly was her plan in terms of if she actually was open to them being there or if she was just kind of playing the game. Did you have like, based on your impressions of her, did you like lean more towards one way or the other on that?
Well, I felt like she was, again, like in my head, she was just, they thought this was all pure destiny, will of the force crap, and it really wasn't, right? She was either aware of them landing on this planet and then forced them to get to the hut, because I do find it coincidental that she just happened to be making dinner, just happened to make enough food for all of them because they ate until they were like stuffed, right? And it's only her and maybe this Wookiee that live in this hut, not to spoil anything, although we're spoiling everything at this point, right? But she made all this food. And then, like, on top of that, without giving away kind of the ending, there's something that had to happen in order for her, like some preparation had to happen. And I guess you could argue there is a moment in there where after they come into the hut, they're sitting there, she does go back to cooking. So maybe she kind of added the special or secret ingredient at that point, or, you know, however that happened. But in my head, I feel like, one, I think she was fully expecting them to. And then I had the question of, like, she says this is the first time anybody's ever been there. But I do wonder if she somehow has been luring other travelers or people that have passed through space into this area before. Like, I don't buy that this is the first time anyone has ever been to this particular, her hut. And I say that because of the inside, right? So when they get inside, right, they come inside and she's like, "Oh, welcome, you know, you take a load off your feet or whatever." But then, like, her house is like littered with tons and tons of other relics and artifacts and gold and jewels. I mean, like, who lives with all that stuff laying around? It's almost like she was trying to entice them and kind of appeal to the greed, which is what really is driving these pirates more than anything.
So you don't think that she was just like a weird hermit doing some meal prep?
No, I don't. But maybe I need to put my tinfoil hat on or just finally admit that I'm a conspiracy theorist. But I do feel like there was something else going on here. But what did you think? Did you feel like it was just coincidence? Happenstance?
I don't know. I did feel like, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to sound crazy now, but I did feel like she might have just been minding her own business. She has this nice little hut out in the middle of nowhere, very peaceful. She lives there with her Wookiee friend, who they don't know he's there yet, but she has this nice little cabin. All her favorite knickknacks are there. She's doing some meal prep, having a nice evening. And then these like rude people show up who, even though they tell her this lie, they do tell her this lie like, oh, like we're being pursued by pirates, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that, I mean, they're pirates. I'm sure she could tell like these people are going to mess me up if they come in here. I need to have my guard up because these people are in my home now. So that was like my whole perception of reading this. I was like, this poor lady is just minding her own business.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case, but you know, hey, that's why we're here, right? To interpret these stories in different ways.
Maybe you're assuming the worst of her.
I think I really, well, and I think it, you know, she does kind of do the worst. Well, so here's the other thing too. Like we were talking about, you know, when she invites them in and basically gives them the soup, she gives them like fruit that she found nearby. And these guys are thinking like, wow, this is like not only the perfect planet, but we can take this home. Like we'll just kill this lady off, right? And then we'll make this our place. And there's fruit there's fruit nearby. It's isolated. No one's around. She said we're the first people. I think at dinner time, one of the characters, was it Meredith, that sizes her up like on her connections, like, hey, so do you have any family around here? And she's like, oh, no, it's just me all by myself out here. Ha, 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 smile, smile.
Yeah, they do ask her that because they were like trying to get a read on if they kill her, if anyone would come looking for them. So
right. Yeah. And she is a night sister. I mean, I think we've already kind of mentioned that. But she does say in here, she says, Shella shook her head. I once had sisters, but now they are gone. So you know what? that just clicked. She says, but now they're gone. So that means this would have to take place after Dooku came to Dathomir and allegedly wiped out all of the Night Sisters from the Clone Wars. You remember that episode? Mm-hmm. So I think it would put it again then just immediately after the Empire in my head, not Age of Rebellion. But either way, she said, I once had sisters, but they're now all gone. She told them, although I seem to honor them, I do honor them every day. And I didn't understand what that meant other than just, at face value that she was doing that. But she knew that she was alone in the world, would never be missed, neither therefore would her treasure be. So she's almost like playing again to what they want. She's telling them, I had sisters, I have no family. If I disappeared, no one would ever know. Like, come take me, kill me, use me, for what you need. It was almost like she was luring them, suckering them into going that extra step. Or she just happened to be an innocent woman making soup.
What if it's both?
In the Hoss system?
What if it's both? What if it started off as she's an innocent woman doing her meal prep, and then the wrong people come mess with her. They don't know who they're messing with, and she's like, "Okay, I'm gonna have some fun with these people, and I'm gonna totally ruin their night."
That could be true too, right? Alex said, "Y'all are just projecting yourself onto these characters." He's probably not wrong. That's what we all
do when we read. Okay,
yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, this is what I would do, and we can see clearly what Lauren would do. I like that you keep saying meal prep like it's a cooking show. Okay, so boy, where are we? So, so
I guess the part I guess we'll talk about the part where they attack her.
Yeah, well, and I was gonna say I had a joke in here about like no one does the dishes for her. Like they all finish eating, and they just kind of sit back. And so did we say her name? Shellish? Is that her name? I forget now.
Yeah. That is her name. I don't remember if we said it, but that is her name, yes.
But Shellish is the name of the Dathomir witch. And she goes to do dishes, which I thought, well, that's kind of mean. Like she just fed them and she's going to let them stay there, and yet they don't even want to help out with it.
They didn't ask to help or anything.
Nope. Bad guess. And then I think it's Meredith decides that at that point that he was going to go ahead and try to kill her. And so he pulls out his dagger. He starts walking up behind her. And this is where it gets kind of weird. I guess this is where the magic comes into place, right? She turns around. She's kind of smiling, almost like anticipating or relishing in the fact that this pirate is going to go ahead and try to take her life. And it's at that point, I think I have it here. I might read it in just a second. But at that point, all of the shadows, right? So there's not a lot of light in this little hut, home, whatever it is. All the shadows kind of start moving around and dancing, and it's got the pirates certainly concerned. They're looking around and thinking, like freaking out, like, whoa, what's going on here? And it says that the shadows kind of merge and converge and form this Wookiee out of nowhere, right? And so, and we can get, I mean, I want to just pull the Band-Aid off on this one right now, because this is where I felt like, okay, so what was not clear to me was whether or not this is just the way she summoned the Wookiee physically, or do you feel like this Wookiee at some point was, maybe dead, was now an apparition of sorts, that he came in that, because of this dark magic? How did you interpret that?
I almost felt like maybe he was hidden by the magic and she was slowly revealing him.
Oh, okay.
Because I interpreted him as like an actual real person. I don't really know why I interpreted him that way. Because now when I think back on the story, I'm not sure if there were any clues to, like, for sure say that he wasn't like one of the options that you said. But for whatever reason, I took it as he was a real person. And maybe he's like her friend, her roommate, her boyfriend, who knows. But she like used the shadows to reveal him from his like hiding spot.
Yeah. And you had a question here whether or not Shellis ever was afraid. I don't think she ever was. Like, I think she was fully confident, knew exactly what was going to happen. Again, anticipating that this is probably what they were going to do, is try to take her life. And, her wild card, or her card, ace in the hole there, is calling upon Wookiee is his name. His name is never said in the book, in the short story, but in Uprising, he was in that, and that was his character's name. So Wookiee the Wookiee, not a good guy. There's not a whole lot in him. I almost think too, just kind of a quick aside, I think a lot of this story, like the gory details that the normal readers, normal people, not us, would read this story and be like, oh, that was cool, without getting into all the details. But I think if you really wanted the details, I think both of these characters were like prominent characters, especially Shellish. She was like a major character in the Uprising game. Like, you spent time with her. You learned about her daughter. By the way, aside, her daughter's name is Death Stick. Like naming your kid Cigarette or Blunt. Like, why would you name your kid Death Stick? But that aside, the point is, you really got to know these characters from the game. So I think maybe those questions would probably get cleared up there. And maybe even like we probably would know something about your other question here, is whether or not, is this her roommate? Is it the guy who lives next door? Is it her love interest? Is she like a Maz Kanata, pining for Wookiees? I don't know. Those are good questions, Lauren.
She might not be a Maz Kanata. She might not be as annoying as Maz, as you would probably put it.
Yeah.
She might be a little bit more subtle than that, but who knows? I mean, the way that it's written, you could interpret it in any one of those ways, really.
Right. Well, either way, this Wookiee manifests from the shadows, either literally or figuratively, steps in front of Marith, who's about to try to stab Shellish with the dagger. And, Shellish is freaking out. He's trying to think, what's my next move here? And so he goes ahead and tries to do it anyways. And Wookiee, like, clobbers him, sends him, like, flying to the door almost at that point. And it's at this point that Shellish, I think Juliet brings out a blaster. And before she can fire, this is where Shellish says, "You have eaten from my pot and drunk from my bottle, and that is everything you deserve. Now you shall leave this place and never return. For next time I shall not be so benevolent." Right? And it's at that, these guys are like spooked. Like, she's giving them a warning saying, you guys need to leave or whatever. And it seems innocently enough, like, oh, okay, well, we came and ate, and they head out. And so they leave. I mean, they book it back to the ship. Nearly, at this point, I think it's dawn, so it's really not as dark. They've been there for a number of hours. Time has passed. So they're heading back to their ship. And why don't you kind of just take us to the very last piece of this here?
Yeah, so when they get back to the ship, they are having a laugh because they think that they got her because she let them go without killing them. So they feel like they just got away with it. And even though they don't get to hide the treasure there, they're like, okay, well, I mean, we got out of it alive. That's all that matters.
Right. It's funny now. Sure, guys.
Yeah, exactly. But then, like, once they're actually back there, what she says about you've had what you deserve, or you've gotten what you deserve, their loot starts disappearing, and all of their treasure, it disappears from like their possession, and it ends up materializing in Shellish's house. So she has used her force magic to somehow steal the treasure from them. And I did kind of go back and forth on if this was like either if it was a one-time thing where she just knew like how to get the treasure, and her saying you've had what you deserve was just kind of like, I don't know, a little warning, or if it was actually a curse that she put on them and now she's just going to get all their stuff.
Right.
So that was another thing that I felt like was kind of open to interpretation. But did you lean like one way or the other on that?
Yeah.
one?
So I'm with you. Like you can interpret this as she placed a curse on them so that anything they touched, at least back of their ship, maybe even longer. That was a question I have. Like, if it's a curse, are they cursed forever? That anytime they touch treasure, gold, and you think about it from a pirate's perspective, I guess they're going to be accountants at this point, right? But anytime they touch gold or touch this treasure, it like Juliet was the first one. I think it was the human girl. She picks up that goblet, and the goblet disintegrates in her hand. That dust kind of floats down, and then, like you said, on the other side, back in the hut, it manifests from that dust and shows up in her little, her home there. So yeah, could it be a curse? Maybe. Could it be something that she put in their food? Because at one point, she went back to continue doing her meal prep, and then she served them the food. And the entire time they were eating too, we kind of skipped over this. She was kind of just sitting back, rocking away, smiling.
She wasn't eating,
yeah, she was very content to just watch them eat and enjoy the food. So, part of me thinks, well, maybe she did something there. I was, honestly, when I read this story, I was like, oh, she's setting them up to die. Like she's going to kill them, or they're going to realize they're eating themselves or future selves, or, something weird, right? Of course, it didn't get that dark. That would have been definitely a Dark Legends tale.
That would have been very Shakespearean.
Yeah, exactly. Or it could just be as simple as, like you said, where somehow through force magic, because they were there, I don't know how that would have worked. But like you said, Mother Talzin did the same thing, right? She was able to create something out of nothing using force magic. So I think the ability is certainly there. We've proven that. It's, again, been demonstrated in Star Wars canon proper. But I think that's, again, the beauty here, is it's kind of open to interpretation as to how and why all of their stuff started to disintegrate and appear in her home. And I think that's probably maybe why she's got all the other treasure. I think they said that at one point she was a treasure hunter herself or something like that. They kind of alluded to that. So you could say all the treasure that was there was already hers. Seems kind of materialistic of her to throw it all up when the pirates came. But also could be that, other people have come through, and this wasn't the first time that stuff started showing up in her home.
Were you surprised that she didn't kill them? Because
Yeah.
at first I was kind of like, why not just kill them back?
And we'll see. Okay, so then maybe it's because she needed them. Maybe part of this curse or part of the magic was she needed them to touch the materials, right? The treasure, in order for it to transport over into her home.
So
is kind of how I
they're
interpreted
like
that.
the vessel of how the things,
Yeah.
how she knows what things she needs to get to her, if that makes sense. Like they have to touch it first for it to actually work, maybe.
Exactly.
It can't just be like just anything.
Right. And if she killed him, then I guess she could have went after the treasure, but then she'd have to go, traverse, go find the ship, all that. Why do all that when you can just put a spell on these people and, have them send it back over to her? And of course, as pirates, this is probably kind of what Dale's saying here. There are worse fates, far worse than death. It's essentially what's going on here with these pirates, because they've just lost everything. I mean, and they kind of talk about at the very beginning. This is a lot of loot. It's not a small, insignificant amount of things. This is an entire cache that they've stolen from the Empire, which they then stole from their own guild or band of pirates as well. So
Yeah, it was all for nothing now.
Yep. And that's the story. It's, again, really short, sweet. I think it's one of the standout ones, like I said earlier, for Myths and Fables, although I think most of them in there are pretty good. So hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk about more. So kudos to George Mann. That guy's got a bright future ahead of himself here in Star Wars. That was me in 2020. He's already written a lot of stuff, including more recently books for the High Republic. So
Yeah, a lot of great High Republic stuff from him.
yeah, he's been good. And he's like buddies with Captain Scott, so that kind of helps as well to kind of be on the know on some of that stuff. I love some of the stuff that they've collaborated on as well. Well, that's it for this story, and then so let's look ahead to Sunday. So Sunday we're going to come back and do what we talked about Disturbance, which is a story that takes place, and it actually, I won't spoil everything, but I want to just kind of tease it up. So again, it's from a certain point of view, Empire Strikes Back, and there's a line in The Empire Strikes Back where Palpatine says there's been a great disturbance in the Force. And this story is what that disturbance is. What was it that Palpatine saw? What was it that he felt that made him, say that to Vader? And it's so deep. Like it's so much more. I love what Mike Chen has done with the story. It goes beyond, oh, I just had a small vision or something. It's like really far out there. So I really can't wait to honestly break that open and talk a little bit more about it. So that'll be on Sunday night. Let's see. I think that's all we had. You got any final words, any final thoughts before we get out of here for tonight?
Well, the Mike Chen one I'm excited about because I heard that in the upcoming Return of the Jedi, from a certain point of view, he has a story of Anakin becoming one with the Force. So that was part of the reason why this one from Empire Strikes Back was on my top 3 that I sent you, is because I was like, this would be kind of cool as like a lead up to that next story that he has coming out, because I'm particularly excited for that next one. So
yeah, I think a lot of people are hoping, maybe hoping or anticipating is probably a better word, that we'll get some formal canon explanation as to why Anakin was able to appear as a Force ghost, even though he technically didn't go through the training. I think the prevailing theory has been that time is not absolute, and it travels differently once you die. So, eons may have passed, even though in movie time it was just, a matter of hours or whatever it was. So I think we'll get some explanation there. I think that's my hope anyways, because I've always wondered about how he's able to kind of do that. So either way, it's Mike Chen. He's done a really outstanding job so far with everything that he's contributed to Star Wars literature. So it's going to be a good story, and I'm excited to read that one and certainly talk about the one on Sunday as well.
yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, before we get out of here, I just want to say thank you to everybody that showed up for the live stream tonight, especially Dale, Music Train, Jonathan, Sky, Alex. We even got Chris Jones. Jonesy, sorry, I didn't miss you, man. He says, is this Chewie and the Porg breakdown? No, I'm sorry.
Wrong one.
Wrong one, dude. They have to go back to about 3-4 years ago for that one here. And Ronald White made an appearance here at the very end as well. So thanks for coming out here. He's got a question. I've been reading through Phase 2 of the High Republic. I feel like it's much more manageable, especially Path of Vengeance. Any thoughts for Phase 3? Lauren?
Well, I will say I was always partial to Phase 1, and that still is true, even after Phase 2. But Path of Vengeance was awesome. As far as Phase 3 goes, I'm very excited for Phase 3 because I'm ready to get some of those Phase 1 characters back. Mm-hmm. So I've got high hopes for it, and I'm already convinced I'm going to love it just because of how much I loved all those characters the first time around.
Yep. And I think my thoughts are same. I would echo everything there, but I really am interested to see how they're going to bring those two stories together, like everything that's happened in the first and the second phase, how they bring that up and kind of, because there is a plan. We know it's been the plan. We know they had an idea of how this was going to work. It's still not completely clear to me. I've got some thoughts and opinions on where they could go, but I'm excited about it as well, because I think it's going to not only do that, it's going to give us the old characters back. I've got a lot of questions, a lot of stuff that was unanswered after the Phase 1 had ended. And then all that too, like I'm interested to see what are they going to do, if anything, to set the stage for Acolyte or for, the events that are going to transpire between now and Acolyte. So what does that look like? What does that space look like? I also am interested too, because I think in my opinion, depending on the success of Phase 3, that could lead into other stories. Like there's still going to be a time gap that happens after Phase 3 leading up to Acolyte, that maybe there are going to be additional stories. Or, does the success allow us to go even further back than the High Republic? 300 years, 450 years, whatever the case may be. They've done a really good job of world building, setting things up, mentioning things, little Easter eggs here and there. So they've really painted a lot of avenues for all of the writers existing and future to take with the High Republic, should they want to explore that more. So I love the era. It's just been really, really great. So yeah, he says, my thoughts exactly. I guess he's going with you because I don't really have any good, concise thoughts on this. I'm kidding. All right. Thanks, Ronald, for the question and for coming in tonight. So, all All right. Don't forget, if you guys are interested, go out to cantinacast.com/YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel and get all the notifications. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff so we can get into the algorithms and this stuff can move up. We appreciate that. And I guess that's going to be it. I'm trying to get to... This is so much easier when Jonesy's here, right? Because he talks and I get to set everything up, and I didn't get to do that yet. So
it's
I'm
like
going to roll
we were
credits.
talking about last time. Should I get out and push?
Hey, man, whatever works. I'm going to assign you... Okay, so Sunday, I'm going to assign you something new. Okay? So that way you'll make things easier. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys here in just a few days.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.